Good morning, ladies. So this week I want to take a look at Ruth. So we are going to do some bread making with Ruth. Sorry, I kicked the tripod's on. Trying something different this week. But yeah, we are going to make bread with Ruth. And as you know, the book of Ruth is incredibly small. But I want to look at 7 things that we notice about Ruth because quite frankly, they're traits that we should all strive for. And if we really look at Ruth's background, she was a Moabitess. She was looked down upon because Ruth was considered a Gentile because she wasn't Jewish, and the Jewish people looked down upon the Gentiles as filthy dogs. And so the fact that God used her in the lineage of Jesus because Ruth begat Obed begat Jesse begat David. Yes, Obed. You know what I mean? And that is so close right there to David. You know, you're talking, so Obed, Jesse, David. So 3 generations of, you know what I mean, men right there. Ruth may have actually gotten to meet King David. It's not recorded in scriptures, but it is there. She may have actually gotten to meet King David without realizing what he would become. Because, I mean, 30 years old is usually when they would start doing things for God. And, you know, David was a teenager. So if Ruth was 30 and she had Obed, that would have made her about 60 when maybe, you know, Jesse was born, which would have made her somewhere in her 90s when David was born, you know, and people could live that long. So it's possible that she actually got to meet and or hold King David, not knowing exactly what he would be used for. So that's pretty cool if you think about it. Because you didn't have to be 30 to start having kids. They actually married quite young back then. But first thing we notice about Ruth is that she was loyal. Because when we first meet Ruth, she is away from Bethlehem. She is in the country of Moab. And she is there with Orpah, her other sister-in-law. And when Naomi's sons die, you know what I mean, they're sent away by Ruth originally, and neither one of them really wanted to go, kind of, but it didn't take Orpah long to decide, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go. Sorry, the camera's being, first time using this tripod. But it didn't take Orpah long or even much convincing to go ahead and go back to your father's house and maybe be able to get a family that way. But we see that Ruth, she clings on and she's begging Naomi to take her with her. And that actually segues us into our next thing, is she was very courageous, you know, because she was looked down upon by her mother-in-law's family and countrymen. She didn't know it. She wasn't going to know anybody in Bethlehem. She wasn't going to be received well to start with, but she went anyway, knowing that this would be how it was. And she went, and she did a lot of things, probably at the start with, where she wasn't received very well, and she probably wasn't even treated very well to start with. But they saw that she was respectful, which is our third point here, is she was respectful. She was respectful to Naomi. She didn't tell Naomi, no, I'm going with you. She begged her to bring her along. When she went to start gleaning in the fields, she asked her, can I go into this field and glean? And you know what I mean? And so the people around her saw that she was respectful, and she was probably respectful to more than just Naomi. It's just what's recorded here is that she was respectful to Naomi. And on top of that, because she was so respectful, she also became respected. The people around her, they only had good things to say about her after they actually got to know her. When Boaz sees her in the field and he asks who this is, they say, that's Ruth, Naomi's daughter-in-law. And then they tell him that she's been working hard. She's not tarrying in the kitchen. She's not hanging out at the well. She's been working hard, cleaning, and just, she's only came in to get a drink once. So she's respected in that manner. And it also shows that she's a great worker because she didn't tarry, because she didn't do this, and she just kept at it. You know what I mean? Boaz actually blessed her efforts because he knew that she was trying to make a living for her and Naomi. And she was patient. If you look at, all the things that Naomi tells her to do and all the ways in which we are told that she was told to do them, we can see the patience of Ruth because she didn't demand results right now. She didn't have to insert herself into the things. She stopped, she waited for the right timing, she did things in the right order, and as a result, she was able to end up marrying Boaz. And I'm going to go so far as to say she actually loved him, because otherwise, why would she have put herself in the situation that she did in chapter 3, where she uncovers his feet and covers them with her skirt. You know what I mean? And back then everybody slept on the floor in one big room, and so she found out where he was sleeping. She uncovered his feet with the blanket, and then she lay down at his feet. So my guess is that he was laying this way and she was laying this way, and covered his feet with her skirt. And when he woke up, he saw her there. This was how ladies expressed interest in a man back then, when they were interested in being more than just employer, employee, worker, friend, whatever. You know what I mean? So she was patient, and because she was all these other things, she was prosperous. She got the guy. She married Boaz, and on top of that, she had children. And we know that back then, that having children was one of the ways God chose to bless women, because frankly, if they weren't doing things to please him, he would more often than not choose to make those women barren. And she didn't have children from her first husband. She only had the children that she had with Boaz, and the first one that we see was Obed. It's the only one mentioned here, but you know what I mean? So God used a lady that was strong in the faith, because I'm sure she learned plenty from both Naomi and Naomi's sons, and I don't think she got to meet Naomi's husband, but she might have. But she saw their faith and then clung on to it. And when she left Moab, she probably also left her, it's probably a symbol of leaving the worldly things behind, leaving the things that weren't of God behind, and following after God, because she followed Naomi into God's country, God's land, and we see that, well, why did Naomi and her husband leave to begin with? Because there was a famine. And sometimes God takes us out of a place in order so that he can bring something else good in. And you have to be faithful in wanting to obey and see what it is that the Lord has for you. I see a lot of areas in which that I can improve just looking at Ruth. I'm not always patient. I'm not always, actually, as a kid and even as into my adult years, my philosophy has always been, you show me respect and I'll show you respect. But that's not what it is here. She had to show respect in order to earn the respect. And so that's something that I have to work on, Patience is not a virtue I possess, and I don't recommend that anybody pray for patience, because we all know what happens when you do that. But God gives us opportunities every day to work on patience and to be patient. You know what I mean? courageous? What does that look like for you? Are you stepping up in the areas where God wants you to step up that's maybe a little out of your comfort zone? Or are you just lax and happy in your comfort zone and not really doing much? We're called to serve in God's army, but are we doing that? Because in order to do so, you have to be courageous. You have to be willing to have the unpopular opinion amongst maybe even your own family at times. And trust me, I do that a lot, And so, I mean, it kind of just is. And the personalities that develop out of this are often very, we're going to use the word meek. I don't know. I never used to like that word, but they're also very, they're often very meek. Look at Sarah. Look at, can't think of any names at the moment. Ruth, she was very quiet. She's very reserved, but she was also very, willing to work. You know what I mean? She could do things, and she could probably do more than what most people thought she could, just because she didn't necessarily do it. But you're talking, these women gave birth at home, maybe with a midwife, and no drugs. I've had 4 children, 2 of them without drugs whatsoever. No, that was not on purpose. There are women that do. And there are women that have multiple children without drugs and on purpose like that. And oftentimes when you listen and hear the birth stories, the labor to them isn't that bad. It's not that painful. It's not that thing that we build up in our mind. My youngest was probably the least traumatic out of all of them as far as pain goes, and he was born without pain meds. My second son, Asa, I wanted to crawl up the wall and die. I was in so much pain. But I was also in 2 very different places in life when I had those 2. Both of them were born in a hospital. But they were both, without any type of pain meds whatsoever. And my other 2, it was a shot of whatever it was that they give you when they just inject it into your IV. But it was, again, different places in life for all 4 of them. When I was pregnant with Booger, I was very sick all the time, but I'd come to a place in life where I'm like, you know what? This is my last one. I'm going to enjoy this. And I did. And it just made things, it was a whole different perspective on it. And as a result, we all have different stories with that one. But there are ways that I could have been more like Ruth in each and every of those situations. And, I know where I was going with that. So these women back then, they were stronger than what I would say the vast majority of the American population is today. Because we can't handle it. We can't have a headache without a Tylenol. We can't, we're spoiled. I will say it like that. We are very spoiled. And yes, I will add myself into that category with all respect and enthusiasm, because we are very spoiled with all of today's modern conveniences. I mean, I'm sitting here talking at an undisclosed amount of people from my camper on a phone, so I don't actually have to see the people making faces at me and going, ugh, what is she doing? Or who does she think she is? I might see mean comments on here, but ooh-hoo, keyboard warrior from behind a screen, delete. You know what I mean? I don't have to look at that person. I don't even have to know who that person is, because screen names, my channel isn't even my name. It's simply hymns, because I love music so much. So there's layers upon layers of protection, whereas back then they didn't have keyboards, they didn't have screen names. You were known by your name, and there wasn't any getting away from it, because it often followed you, because frankly you couldn't hop on a plane and fly halfway across the country where nobody knows you. You know, you only could travel so far every day. And so people that knew you were always going hither and thither. And so you had a reputation, you had a name. If your dad was somebody that wasn't very reputable, they would you would be assumed to be the same way. You couldn't just escape it. You had to earn it back. And often you had to work harder, even though it wasn't you that did it, it was somebody else, you know. But all of these different traits and things like that came together. It made such a perfect story, a perfect human being in which to aspire for. Did Ruth sin? Absolutely, she's human. But if we look at the biblical aspects of all the things, I'm sure she wasn't always patient. I'm sure she wasn't always all the things. You know what I mean? But if we work harder to that, it's the perfect ideal of what we women are supposed to be. Um, both my Bible heroes are both Ruth and Esther for two very different reasons. And we need to strive to figure out what it is about us that we need to be more like them. So I will leave you with that thought for today, ladies, and you have a good one. And I encourage you all to read the book of Ruth this week and see what it is that you can glean from it that is something that maybe you needed to hear in your life. Thank you.